What's the most supernatural experience you've ever had? My aunt and uncle owned a house that had quite a history. It was a funeral home, a hospital and a sanatorium, long before they bought it with the dream of turning it into a bed and breakfast. There are 3 instances that really stick out. 1. We were emptying the basement out of old trash, and we found a false wall revealing a secret cabinet with a hand in a jar. No idea what the heck it was all about, but later on that day, we were all eating pizza, and my cousins and I were wandering around and ended up at the base of the stairs to the basement, where we could hear what sounded like children's whispers and laughter. 2. My cousins and I were going to clean the boxes out of the attic. It was pitch black, so my cousin grabs a flashlight and starts to head up. As soon as he gets into the attic, the flashlight dies. He comes down and it works again, but when he gets into the attic, it dies again. He climbed down and shined the light on the wall and into the attic where again, the light died. The light would not shine in the attic. 3. This is the last one. My cousins and I were in the balcony room. Supposedly it belonged to a rich elderly lady who was dying of TB and paid for this room to be redone with a walkout balcony overseeing the town. My cousins and I walked out to the edge of the balcony and gazed out when all of a sudden, the door about 15 feet away slammed shut. It was the dead of winter and there was no wind. It slammed with so much force I had to really throw my shoulder into it to open the door again. My uncle, who was downstairs working, didn't hear a thing. There were a few other weird unexplainable things that happened, but those 3 still stick with me like 10 years later. I was 14 or 15, sitting in our downstairs living room while my parents slept in their bedroom upstairs. It was around 1 a.m. or so, and I was on the computer playing a video game. The only light in the house comes from my computer screen and a lamp that's opposite me, by the couch. Suddenly, I hear a man's voice say my name very plainly. Not a whisper, not a yell. Just a mid-level call that sounds like it's coming from the darkened hall. I assume it's my dad, because sometimes he comes down the stairs and calls at me from the lower step to tell me to get to bed or whatever. I get up and go into the hallway, but no one's there. I look up the stairs and call, lightly, out to my dad, but then I hear his telltale snores from upstairs. A bit weirded out, I go back to the computer. A minute later, I hear the voice call say my name again, but this time, it's as if the person speaking is right beside me, and the voice is a bit more assertive. I jump and look in the direction of the voice. Nothing is there. Suddenly, the lamp across the room starts to hum. The light flickers and the light bulb explodes. I got pretty unnerved at that point. I turned on all the downstairs lights, cleaned up the burst bulb, and went upstairs to sleep. Second story. I was about 8 or 9 and was getting ready for bed in my room. I was sitting on my bed and taking off my socks when I suddenly got this overwhelming feeling that I was being watched. I knew of the feeling, but had never experienced it myself. I felt for sure that something with bad intentions was standing over against the wall between my closet and my closed door, watching me. A feeling of terror washed over me, and I sat there for what felt like an hour, probably just a few minutes, staring at the floor, unable to move, paralyzed with fear. Eventually, I mustered up the courage to look up, reasoning that what I was feeling was silly. I knew that once I looked up and saw that nothing was there, the feeling would go away. It didn't. I looked up and felt even more terrified. Nothing was there, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I had locked eyes with some malevolent, invisible force. After another minute, frozen, unblinking, I stood and made my way slowly toward the presence. Trying to decide whether to bolt out the door, it was right beside it, or face it, I decided to approach it. Eventually, I felt as if I was face to face with whatever this thing was, and the feeling of a presence was as strong as ever. I raised my hand, paused, and then thrust it forward. I felt a bit surprised when my fist hit the wall. The feeling of being watched suddenly disappeared and I felt alone again. I never had that feeling ever again. This was mid-2000s. I was asleep in my room with my girlfriend at the time, at my mom's house. I was about 25. It was sometime after midnight, and we were both startled awake by the sound of loud, angry voices, engaged in some kind of a fiery argument downstairs. Most of the discussion was impossible to hear, save for occasional F-bomb or other swear words. It was intense, and we both looked at each other, in shock I believe. I truly thought our house was being burglarized. My mom was asleep down the hall and I didn't hear her stirring. I told my girlfriend to use my cell phone and call 911 if she heard me getting into it with whoever was in our home. I grabbed my pistol from my desk and tried to slink downstairs. The voices cut off as soon as I left my bedroom. The house was quiet as I banked a left turn to the top of the stairs. I listened for noises and heard nothing. I descended the stairs, cursing every loose floorboard in that old house. The moment I landed on the first floor, I began clearing the rooms and flicking lights on as I went. My heart was racing. I was sure that at any moment, I would be face to face with the people I had heard moments before. But the entire house was empty. The TV was off, the DVD player as well. The front door remained locked and bolted. The motion lights had not been activated. All the windows were shut, making it less likely that the noise could have been coming from some sort of domestic disturbance in the neighborhood. There was just no way to rationalize what we heard. If it had just been me, I would have attributed it to one of my usual nightmares, as I'm a vet diagnosed with PTSD. But the fact that we both woke up and we both heard it made me feel a bit more uneasy. There is probably some very rational explanation, but I truly believe there was some dark energy at play in that house. My mother said she felt it on a number of occasions coming from the coat closet on the main floor. When she would reach for a coat, she felt like something wanted to shut her in there. My brother reportedly saw a phantom or ghost, not sure the difference, floating above him after he woke up in the afternoon. He's not the type to make that sort of stuff up, and he parted with the story very reluctantly. I believe everyone had an experience there. Weird. When my two dads moved into our home in New Jersey when I was 15, it was a real fixer-upper. It was built in 1942 and had been owned by the same couple, though the previous owner, a widow, had died of old age. I didn't know what had happened to her husband. There was a back room in our basement that freaked me the flurbo out. It was small and my dads used it as storage till we could remodel the whole area. I would hate whenever one of them would ask me to get something from that room. I felt as though I was not alone. I was being watched and it was just a most unsettling, dismal feeling. Our family dog, Roxy, who was a Rhodesian Ridgeback and not easily spooked, refused to set foot, paw I guess, into this room. My nana came to visit us for a little while, and after she left, the room felt much lighter, and I was okay being in there. I asked her why. She's always been a little kooky, and she told me she can see and communicate with ghosts. She said there was a ghost of a man who had been in the house and didn't understand that he was dead. She said he told her that he really liked how my dads were decorating, but didn't understand why we were here. She told him he was dead and he needed to move on. He tipped her hat to her and walked through the front door, never to be seen again. I later found out that the old widow's husband had committed suicide in the room that I hated so much. My stepdad found some of the watercolors he painted and displayed them. My stepdad was an artist. My house was built in the mid-1800s as a farmstead, and over the last 20 years that my family has occupied it, we've made various renovations to it. One thing we discovered while gutting the last unrenovated room in the house was that some of the struts and paneling was charred, as if there had been a particularly bad fire in that room. Later on, my brother told me that he had seen a pair of feet that looked burnt running through the house late at night a few years ago. I was incredulous and ready to disbelieve him when I realized that I had experienced something similar a long time ago. When I was a child around Christmas time, I decided to see if I could stay up and hide at the top of the stairs to catch a glimpse of Santa. At around 1 a.m., after I knew everyone was asleep, I crept to the staircase to see a pair of dark feet walk from the kitchen to the living room, in front of the bottom of the steps. My parents were definitely asleep, so I had assumed it was Santa and excitedly went to bed. Now, I'm not so sure it was, but rather something more in line with what my brother saw some years later. This is a little convoluted, and I will try my best to make it clear. I have never told anyone the paranormal part, as feel no one would believe me. My father and his brother Gary were lifelong dairy farmers in Wisconsin. We live less than 2 miles apart. When needed, we would trade help and labor on harvest and planting jobs that demanded it. Many times Dad would send me, saying, "You have to go and help at Gary's." Eventually, I took over our farm, and cousin Mike took over from his father Gary. Gary passed away 12 years ago, and Gary's widow eventually met a nice man and moved in with him. They are both in their late 70s now. Mike moved back into the farmhouse. Mike sold the dairy herd after Gary died and got a 9-to-5 job. I rent his land. My dad passed away over 6 years ago after me taking care of him for 18 years. He lived in this house his whole life. I sold my dairy herd soon after. About a year after Dad passed away, on an October night, Mike started a fire in the wood furnace in the basement and went to bed. His sister had just gotten out of a bad relationship and was living there too. She got home from her job about midnight and added some wood to the furnace and went to bed as well. The story I told everyone when this happened was this. I was coming home from looking at equipment for sale across the state. I stopped in a nearby city to see a late movie. Then hit a bar for a few soft drinks. Then had a meal at a 24-hour restaurant. On the way home about 3 a.m., I passed by Mike's place and saw fire coming out the chimney and smoke coming out from the basement door. I dialed 911 with the location and ran into the house yelling for them to get up. There was minimal smoke in the upstairs. Mike and I went downstairs with a fire extinguisher and found an area about 3 feet square at the base of the chimney where the floor joists were burning. We put it out with the extinguisher and some water. The fire department arrived and put out the chimney fire. No real smoke damage upstairs and minimal repairs to the house, but a few more minutes and the fire would have burned up into the kitchen. The truth of what happened was this. I had gotten home about 10:30 and went to bed. Now some of this I am not clear on. I am not sure if I dreamed it or if it was some sort of apparition. Close to 3 a.m., Dad opened the door to my room and turned on the light and said, "Get up, you have to go help at Gary's." I remember saying, "In the morning." He said, in his most authoritative voice, "No, right now." I sat bolt upright in bed. My room door was open and the hallway light was on. I tried to dismiss it as imagination, but I knew I had turned off that light and shut my door. I realized with the adrenaline rush and my lingering doubts, I would not get back to sleep. So for my peace of mind, I decided to get dressed and drive over to check on Mike's place. That's when I spotted the chimney fire. Like I said, I never told anyone this because I fear no one would believe me.